Hey everyone, it's Austin in the middle, and I hope you're doing well today. So, recently I've been jonesing to talk about a comic series and kind of offer reviews slash reading guides for this series as I go along because it's my favorite comic series of all time. I absolutely adore this comic, and it's still going on till this day. And it came out in 1998 as an independent comic, and it still is independent, still has the same creator, original artist, illustrator, and writer involved. Historically, not always, but still, like the fact that this comic has been going on for over 20 years and is about to turn 30 in a few years, it's remarkable, especially for like independent comics standards here. And this comic series has won quite a few Eisner Awards. And if you don't know what an Eisner Award is, it's essentially given out to exceptional comics, more particularly in the independent realm. But if you get an Eisner, you've done something right, right? And the series I want to talk about is Eric Powell's The Goon. Now, The Goon originated in 1998 with Avatar Comics, and there's a wide backstory of stuff to collect and stuff to pick up for the Goon, especially in the early years of the character, that I should, I guess, go over now before we get into what the character is like and what the stories are like and what have you. So, we're going to be looking at Volume Zero today, which is known as Rough Stuff. Now, Rough Stuff has had three individual releases over the years. The first release was done by Eric Powell himself in 2002, where he collected what he could, and he also included some really cool factual information in the back of the original incarnation of Rough Stuff to give backstory about the Goon, his origins, where he came from, and what have you. And that's all fine and dandy. And then the second iteration of Rough Stuff came out with Dark Horse. And this was during the time when the Goon made its jump over to Dark Horse. And that's when the series started to get all the accolades, such as Eisner Awards, being featured in Wizard Magazine, and what have you. Um, that's when I think for the first time, a fellow by the name of, I want to say his name was Dave Stewart. Yeah, Dave Stewart decided to work with Eric Powell and actually provide color for the first time for the Goon in Volume Zero. Yes, if you didn't know this, the Goon in almost every comic prior to going to Dark Horse, like I said, in almost every comic, it was black and white. And that was just the going standard for independent comics back in the day. And some people might be apprehensive to try it, black and white, but we'll get into that shortly. There is a way that you can avoid it if you don't want to read black and white comics. So take that for what you will. But like I said, Dark Horse Volume Two, or I guess Dark Horse Release Two of Rough Stuff has the colorized version of the stories. Plus, there's some more add-ons that the first uh, iteration didn't have. But I think where your best money is at, if you're going to pick up Rough Stuff, if it's not the first incarnation with the black and white original art of everything that's included in there, plus the backstory of the character, um, it's going to be the third incarnation here. Now, the third incarnation is what you're going to see on the thumbnail of the video. In my opinion, it has the coolest cover, but like I said, you get some bonus material that you get in the second incarnation. You get the colorized version of all the stuff that's included in Rough Stuff historically, but you also get new additions in here that were not in anything prior. And some of this stuff is unreleased, completed Goon stuff, like comic strips and whatnot, that I guess Eric Powell never released anywhere. So for that, I think that if you're going to pick up a trade of the series, if it's not going to be the first one, pick up the third one. I actually would recommend that you pick up the first incarnation and the third one. So that way you have the black and white versions and the backstory of the character that's not included in the third incarnation, I should mention. But like I said, you get all this extra bonus stuff that's not in the previous versions either. So yeah, pick both of these up if you want the full experience just on the trade level. Now, because I'm doing a reading guide as well, I should mention this that you're not going to get everything you really need in issue zero. I mean, with volume zero. And let me explain. There's a comic book, as you'll read in um, volume zero, if you pick up the original trade or maybe even the second incarnation, you'll read up on this character that I guess was the prototype of the Goon. And the character is known as Monster Boy. Now, Monster Boy, he's a character named Mog, and he debuted in a comic that was essentially made by a group of up and coming artists from Tennessee that Eric Powell used to, I guess, run in circles with back in the mid 90s. And it was released in a comic called Bestsellers Number One. Now, there's only 1,000 copies of this comic supposedly out there that exists. I have one, and it's signed by Eric Powell and a few other artists that worked on the issue. I didn't want to crack open my copy and read the story for posterity for this video. I might at some point, though, by itself. But I'm just letting you know, I'll even show you a picture that I was able to find online that you can find in the comic of, what you can kind of expect out of the story. This is not included in Volume Zero Rough Stuff. And I guess it's important to experience it because two out of the three incarnations of the volume go into great detail about it. So, yeah, maybe this is something that would be worth it to you, especially if you wanted to read and experience everything Goon. Unfortunately, it's not online anywhere, pirated or put on archive anywhere, and is not available to buy an ebook. Maybe one day Eric might decide to put it into something, but as of now, this is your only way to get it. So just be warned. But like I said, you're going to want to get Bestsellers Number One. And then, like I said, with the other two, you're going to want to get the first incarnation of Rough Stuff, and you're going to want to get the third incarnation of Rough Stuff. So these three are the mandatory things you're going to need to have a complete Volume Zero experience. Okay. So moving on from that, real quick, if you want to get into collecting the individual issues, there is some weeds you're going to have to sift through. You're going to see a few books online that are going to be advertised or told to you that this is the first appearance of a character or features an early appearance of the character. So you probably think in the back of your head, oh, these are actually appearances that should be picked up as well. So I get the full scope of everything. No, you don't need these three. Crystal Number One, this features an ad of Monster Boy. You probably see this on the internet. You don't need this. It's just an ad, as you see in the picture here. So you don't need this for reading. Avatar Illustrated from 1998. This has a full page dedication to the Goon, and you see two full pages with comic panels and word bubbles that eventually end up in Goon issue number 1 from Avatar Press, but you get those in Goon issue 1 Avatar Press. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need this Avatar Illustrated at all. And the same thing applies to this other Avatar Illustrated that you're going to see out there. This is a quote unquote early Goon appearance or ad. It's literally just an ad featuring the front cover of Goon number 1. Again, you don't need this for reading. So these three issues, you don't need them. Unless you are a fan of Goon or something and you're a completionist and you just want everything he's ever been featured in, be my guest. But, since it's early days Goon, there's not a lot going on there. I guess these books have become, desirable for fans because the lack of appearances. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need those. However, there are 5 individual comics that you might want outside of Bestsellers number 1. So I'll run down them real quick. There's a comic, Dreamwalker Zero. This has a 3 to 4 page Goon story. This debuted before Goon number one, and the rest of the remaining first three dedicated Goon comic issues from Avatar Press. So this is really the first appearance of the character. Now, the storyline doesn't matter to the actual overarching, I guess, storyline or some semblance thereof within the first three issues, but it's a first appearance nonetheless. And you're going to get a sense of the Goon, his sidekick Frankie, and I guess the humor and the shtick behind the character. So this is something that if you want to collect individually, might be worth picking up. The second thing you might want to look at getting realistically is Dreamwalker Carousel. Now, this features 2 out of 3 confirmed comic strips that Eric Powell made for the character, and both of them can be found in rough stuff, so you really don't need to buy this unless you're like collecting, like I said. But you get 2 out of the 3 that were also co-released on the Goon website back in the day. The third one, I don't know if it ever was put into anything, but I know it is in rough stuff, and you can see it in black and white as it originally was intended in the first incarnation of rough stuff, and then you can get the colorized version in the third or second, whatever one you prefer. But you get all 3 comic strips in rough stuff nonetheless. But like I said, Carousel has 2 out of the 3 of them, and that um, is early Goon stuff. So that might be worth collecting. And then, of course, you have Goon issue number 1 through 3 from Avatar Press that comprise the remaining things for Volume 0 here today. You can buy these for your collection. Fair warn, though, they are expensive. And these also weren't highly printed comics back then. I think the Goon number 1, 2, and number 3 had less than 10,000 copies produced for each. So, they're scarce, especially in high grade. If you're looking for number 1, best of luck to you. Don't be confused. There are quite a few Goon number 1s. There's a Goon number 1 from Dark Horse. There's a Goon number 1 from Albatross Funny Books. There's a Goon number 1 from Avatar. Goon number 1 from Avatar is the first, I guess, quote unquote, full appearance, or whatever term you want to put, where he's actually in a full fledged comic story, right? That takes place over the entirety of a comic book. So take that for what you will. But those 5 issues, if you're going to individually collect, are what you're going to be wanting to look at for Volume 0, including Bestsellers number 1 from 1995. So, with that being said, let's go into talking about the Goon rough stuff real quick. So, content wise, looking at the Goon rough stuff, I'm mainly referring to volume, or I guess the third incarnation here. I have it on my lap and I'll be using this as reference as I talk about it. This was a very intriguing read to learn off the bat from Eric Powell that he looks back on this era of the character in a weird way, because as you'll see if you picked up the first 2 incarnations in the backstory about Monster Boy slash Mog, he thought that the character of Mog wasn't worth crap, and he tried to rework it into a thing that he can make his own and make something, and that's how the Goon was born. But early on, he didn't really have the artist chops nor the writing chops that he found that he really did have later on. And he looks back at this stuff as kind of painful to experience, which is ironic, because I don't know what this would feel like as an artist and a writer. But I can imagine that he looks at this stuff and he probably thinks like, "Oh, I've come such a long way," right? Which is, I guess, underselling how fun these stories really are. Still, despite that, yeah, the art style, as you'll see, I'll show you some pictures of issues 1 through 3 throughout, so you get a sense of what those stories are like too. Don't get me wrong, but you're gonna see that this comics art style does not hold up the same as once you get past this and we get into volume 1 next, which is Nothing But Misery. it looks almost night and day different. But I still think that the art looks good, and the painted covers for the series look absolutely fantastic. And there's some unused art in here as well, as you'll see. I don't want to spoil it all for y'all. Y'all should go buy this and check it out. There's some unused cover art in here that look great too, which is awesome. And you even get this little story here, or I guess this 2 page vignette of the Goon and Frankie talking about rough stuff and talking about um, some things that happen in this early run of their, I guess, characterhood that is really amusing. And you can see their dynamic play out a little bit. Goon, he's kind of like a straight lace, don't take shit off nobody, John Wayne kind of personality. Um, if you're gonna compare him to like Laurel and Hardy, he's, I guess, Hardy, right? The guy with the mustache. And then Frankie is the loudmouth, willing to get into fights, get into trouble, or be the damsel in distress most of the time for Goon. And you see him causing a ruckus with the butler. That's just how they do things, right? And it's been like this since day one with these characters. Which is really intriguing. And I still think that rough stuff is necessary if you're going to read this series, because it does, establish, I want to say establish, but it does introduce you to quite a few characters that you're going to see throughout the run, like Labrazio, Fishy Pete, the zombie priest. It's going to show you the world of the Goon universe in Lonely Street. Give you a little taste of that. There's vampires, there's werewolves, there's Joey the Ball and random gangsters that could be undead, or they can be robots, or there's giant monsters being made by certain criminal organizations, like Zombie Priest creating, I don't know, in issue 1, a giant zombie chimpanzee, which is ridiculous. And there's, giant mutant sewer rats, and you name it. It's just a ball of fun. Now, a lot of it doesn't make sense. A lot of it is random, and every issue has its level of what the fuck am I reading at some point because of how random it is. But you can clearly tell that Eric is experimenting around in this volume, and that's something to admire. Even with his comic strips. And that's actually what I really want to get into first before I get into the overall main stories here. The comic strips here, I'm going to show you the one that was featured in Dreamwalker Zero real quick. This was so much fun. You have the Goon and Frankie being sent to this family's house, and they want to, I guess, exercise a kid in the household. And they find this little girl, not knowing about a potential boy in the household. They find this little girl that possibly is possessed by a demon, and they do what they think is the right thing to get the demon out of her. And it's over the top and ridiculous. It's pretty violent, but that's just how they do things. These aren't straight laced heroes. These are pretty much anti heroes doing, their own free will 99% of the time. So, yeah, I mean, and you can clearly see that the humor is not, you're not supposed to take this seriously. It's supposed to be kind of like a farce, or, a parody on, like, buddy cop mentality. It's hilarious. But then, of course, you see the twist involving the zombie brother and what becomes of that. And there's a running gag, as you'll see, as we'll get into the main stories, where Goon and Frankie, they have an extreme prejudice on zombies. Now, I don't know if this is supposed to be like an allegory or anything from Pal's doing, because the Goon is a time period piece, I guess. It takes place in like a fictional universe that I guess you can transplant onto the 1920s to maybe late 1940s or mid 1950s. It has like this weird melding of a bunch of stuff from that time period. Now there is some wacky things as you'll see throughout the Goon run that don't really match up with the time period, like VCRs. And I swear there was one issue where I thought somebody had a cell phone from memory. I could be mistaken, but it looked like one. So yeah, it's not always too consistent with the time period, but you have to think back on to, if this takes place in the 20s and 50s, what was, the social climate like, especially in neighborhoods where there's high crime and, you know, vagrants and criminals and, mob organizations and people, um, such as the Goon, for example, which I guess is named after, mob goons, right? What kind of individuals would have interacted with a mob goon, essentially. Um, it it makes you wonder if some of this stuff is an allegory, especially when we're dealing with like the zombies or the werewolf species or the vampire species. You'll see that throughout the series, and it kind of makes you think. And maybe, just maybe, Powell is trying to put some substance here and there with it, which often than not you forget could be in there because of how ridiculous and over the top and violent the series really is. So yeah, you get all of that really within the first um, appearance of the character, and it's not even like a real comic story. It's more like a prolonged comic strip, which brings me to some comic strips. Now, these next two I'm going to show you come from Dreamwalker Carousel. In Dreamwalker Carousel, these two strips that were included, I guess were on the website too back in the day. Um, I guess we'll start with this one with uh, the dinner table. This one, you have a family sitting at a dinner table, and there's an undead person, and of course, the pet gets involved, and the Goon is, doing trying to be patient, I guess, and takes matters into his own hands of how he thinks it should be handled, given what happens to the pet. So, yeah, it's goofy. It makes me think like maybe, just maybe, the Goon could have had a life in like an actual newspaper comic if it wasn't so violent. But that's the thing, like, this isn't the last time we're gonna talk about Goon comic strips, because seemingly after this volume you don't really see much of them, and then randomly later on, as you'll see, I actually have some Goon comic strips that kind of reemerged in the mid 2000s, that brought the art form back. But yeah, these were a hoot. So that one, it wasn't my favorite one because I think I like the other one with the bull more. But yeah, I'll go ahead and show you the one with the bull. You see Goon and Frankie are tossing back some snacks and some milk, and then the Goon mutates into a bull and chases Frankie, and then you see the punchline at the end. It's like, this is like a PSA of why you never buy dairy products out of the back of a van from a man named Carjack Malone. See, that's the kind of humor that you're going to see throughout the series that's going to make you laugh. It's just so great. Um, so yeah, and then this other one, this one involves a bus stop. Now, this one was not, to my knowledge, put in any comic that is currently known. I think this was the one that was online exclusive only. And you see Goon at a bus stop dealing with a lady holding a bag, and a kid's asking, "Well, how much does a human head weigh?" And he's like, "Well," he points to the bag, and he's like, "Well, that bag should weigh about 16 pounds." The woman runs away, leaves her purse behind, and then, Goon is like, "Well, you know, my bad." So it's implied that maybe, he'll pick up her purse or what have you. But, Goon's not really like that. He's not going to steal for some innocent woman. But yeah, this one was really funny too, because it throws you some misdirects here. But that's what makes this series good. And I think these strips really do reflect that. So yeah, I really enjoyed those. But there's also some more here, especially in this third incarnation here. You see this unused strip, um, based on, I guess, playing baseball with a baby. And Eric wrote, early unused strip. At the time, I thought playing baseball with babies might have been too harsh. Yeah, I would say that too. It's not really the most tasteful thing ever, but you see them playing baseball with like a baby girl, and yeah, maybe the little girl was getting on their nerves. I can't really tell. Maybe she's deserving of it. I don't know. But yeah, that's something kind of cool, and the fact that it's been preserved at the very least is really cool. So that's also another reason why like I said, you should be picking up this third incarnation because you're getting all this extra stuff in it, y'all. But there's even this unused Christmas one here, and the Goon, I guess, has done a few Christmas stories, and this I guess would have been the first one. I don't know where this would have debuted in, but you see Goon and Frankie here going to an orphanage and helping out the kids, and Goon's dressed up like Santa Claus, trying to be nice to the kids, but then Frankie's giving them all cigars and cigarettes. you know, Smoke up, Sonny. Like the it's deplorable behavior, but because it's Frankie and Goon, it's acceptable. Just fun stuff, y'all. Uh, but really, the cream of the crop here, now that we're done with these little strips here, is the main story. Going to issue one, I think that this issue, despite how random as hell it can be at times, might be my favorite one in this whole volume. I mean, it just throws you right into the action from the get go. We get introduced to the zombie priest. And the zombie priest, he's telling his henchmen, he's like, we got to be careful for the Goon, man, because he's going to thwart my plans. But I'm trying to make this giant chimpanzee, like, made out of, I guess, zombie parts. And, you know, we got to make sure that the Goon stays off our hide. And then we meet the Goon and Frankie for the first time, I guess, in a bar. And you see all these, local patrons just drinking around, being belligerent. And then, you know, one turns into a werewolf because he decides to act on a bounty on the Goon's life that the zombie priest put out. And the Goon gets into a fight with a werewolf in the middle of the bar and makes an example of him. And Frankie's like paying no attention. But because, they get into a fight, crooked cop comes and tries to arrest Goon and take him outside, and it turns out that he's double crossing the Goon and is also trying to collect on the bounty. And then Goon has to fight him, and that invokes the wrath of Joey the Ball, which is, I mean, look at this guy, man. Look at the size of his right hand holding the bowling ball. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just shows like how creative this comic can be, and it's hilarious because Frankie gets tied up as like a hostage, and Goon gets tied up too, and they're taking like some crowbars and wrenches and about to beat the hell out of him, and then Goon's like, "Nope, I'm good. I'm gonna break out. I'll do what I need to do. I'm gonna pick up this gun and I'm gonna kill some of y'all and beat y'all's ass." Sure enough, though, there's some giant rats randomly in the mix, thwarting the plans. And then Goon finds himself, in a pickle with that. I forgot about this part. So you see Joey the Ball's henchman fighting the zombie henchman of the zombie priest. That's kind of funny. Uh, and then Goon comes to the rescue after defeating the rats, all bloodied up, beats the hell out of Joey the Ball. He's looking for zombie priest. I guess he's contemplating leaving Frankie, but then the giant zombie gorilla comes out, the final boss of the issue, and he has to, beat the hell out of that in some graphic ass way. And the body goes splat, won't stay down, so he has to, punch through his eyeballs, rip them out. And then take Frankie out of the building before it goes and explodes. And then he ends up at home, but the zombie henchmen, I guess, want to shock him. So that's fun. It's a fun little issue. Issue two, moving on. Zombie Priest is back. He lost his giant zombie chimpanzee, so he's looking for some new opportunities and maybe some ways to get rid of the goon. And then this man named G Man Smith comes in, I guess, with his cronies, offering him an offer he can't refuse. And then they take to, I guess, some of Goon's lackeys or friends that don't shut up, and they decided to torment him. Um, then Goon and Frankie, I guess, are off doing their own thing. They're going back to the bar, and they end up finding this vampire. And the vampire tries to, do something to him, and then they're like, "Hey, nah, dude, we're gonna light him on fire and attach him to the front of our car and go drive." Okay, it's funny. And then see this dealer looking, trying to sell human brains to the zombie, I guess, addicts. And then he gets busted for selling pig brains, and the goon and Frankie have to, I guess, stop him and save him. And then uh, they, I guess, feed this guy to the wolves. And then these two guys that they were involved with earlier come back, sewn together as like two in one, and they come to fight the goon. And of course, he has to lay the smack down on him, and this invokes the wrath of another character, Fishy Pete, who's coming in to make his mark of the issue. Like I said, it's like these first two issues, there's just a bunch of random stuff happening. But Fishy Pete comes into the mix. He's huge, by the way, and he's missing, like, he has like a peg leg and a hook hand. And Goon's like, "Well, I'm gonna bring out my talking chainsaw and cut you up." I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's so much fun, y'all. I mean, I'm having a blast reading through this with y'all. And then at the very end, it teases Labrazio, and this character, he's been mentioned like once or twice, but in issue 3, I guess it's like the origin of Goon here, where we get to see, he's at a funeral parlor of a good friend, or I guess a family friend, and he reawakens as a zombie, and we see that, Goon has some things against zombies. We've already seen it in a few issues, but he's kind of shocked that his former friend would be willing to turn into one. And then, you have the G Men coming in, trying to, make a ruckus out of the funeral, and then Frankie's left dazed, and Goon is abducted. And Goon is taken back to, I guess, Zombie Priest's headquarters, and he's interrogated about, who is he, how deep does he go with Labrazio, and what's information on Labrazio, because the Zombie Priest wants to figure out how to, get this guy off his ass. So the Goon gives his origin about his, life in the circus, living with his aunt, and him picking up some trades, and also learning how to, kill zombies while at the circus and whatnot. And he becomes like one with the circus, community, and he ends up, I guess, falling for a woman that we hear would later appear in a story called Chinatown, which is, I guess, fabled in this volume, but it actually does become its own volume in volume 6 of The Goon, which is a blast from the past kind of thing. So that's fun that this early on, he's already teasing like way ahead in the future some stuff we're going to see down the line, which is fun. But we see his origin about him, meeting Labrazio for the first time, and um, this unsuspecting death of an old woman at the circus, putting the heat on the circus performers, and Labrazio staying there, and of course, something goes down where the heat is starting to come on him, and the Goon kind of wants to befriend him to, be on his good graces, maybe learn from him or something. And then the police come to arrest Labrazio, and there's a shootout, and his aunt gets killed. And Goon is left orphaned, and he's taken under Labrazio's wing. And Goon really then starts to learn from Labrazio. And then before we get the answer, the G Men are like, okay, well, we know Labrazio is a real guy. Let's go try to find him. And then the Goon's like, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm gonna break out and start beating the shit out of y'all, and kill some of y'all. straight up does. Um, Breaks out, kind of injures himself, but Frankie's at the bar hoping the goon shows up, and sure enough, he shows up. All he wants is, you know, to I guess head home, take a bath, and take the edge off. And we see in a flashback that while he was under Labrazio's, I guess, care, he decides to do something to him and take on, I guess, the mantle. And I should go ahead and preface this that these three issues are, I guess, kind of important to understand before you go into volume one, Nothing But Misery, because this establishes the relationship that moves forward, especially in the early days of the Goon. I would say probably from the Albatross stuff all the way through like middle portion of Dark Horse, where the Labrazio arc, later on that comes back. The Goon takes out his own caregiver, his own idol, his teacher at a young age, and has for years been pretending that this guy has been alive, and he does so that way the community that he lives in can live in fear of something, because not everybody fears the Goon. I mean, as you see in the story, people are coming after him. They're not afraid to try to fuck with him, even though they always end up on the wrong side of the coin. They're always on the losing side. Goon usually comes out on top because he's just a skilled fighter. He knows how to fight these monsters. He takes no shit from zombies. He's perfectly willing to kill a zombie, right? And that's just one of the many examples, right? But they'll come attack him because they don't fear him. But Goon, he doesn't want people to know that Labrazio is dead, because if they did know that he was dead, then it would be way worse. So that's a really compelling thing about the Goon character that resonates, and like I said, it carries on into the next volume, and this is a great setup to that. Despite the randomness in the first two issues, I think the third issue is probably the most clear and concise one. It does kind of pick up where issue two left off with like the G-Men and stuff like that, continuing pressing for the Goon, trying to find information on Labrazio. That was a thing in issue two as well. But I said issue one's my favorite because it's the most bombastic. It's hit the ground running, ridiculous plot setup. Trying to make a zombie chimp, and then you get into the rigmarole of the Goon fighting a werewolf in a bar fight. He ends up getting double crossed by a cop. Ends up with Joey the Ball's gang of misfits. And then he has to break himself out, fight giant mutant rats, and then he has to go back and save Frankie. And all he wants to do is go back to the bar, get a drink or whatnot, but he has to take down this giant boss of a zombie chimpanzee. It's ridiculous, but it's fun, right? I think that's probably I've seen people kind of be very rough on Volume Zero, because of the lack of structure. And many people will say that they think Volume One's way better. And Volume One, I guess, starts off with where I guess Avatar ended for the character, because as we'll see in Volume One, we're actually going to start off with Goon's first Dark Horse appearance, which is actually not in Goon number one from Dark Horse. It's actually in Dark Horse Presents 157, which is an anthology comic. But going off memory, because it's been a while since I've read Volume 1, I can see why people like Volume 1 more. Personally, I really like Volume 0. The art, it is what it is. I prefer the color, if I'm being honest, over the black and white. I just think the color adds more dynamic to the issues. In terms of story, there's no real arc to be had. These are just like little standalone stories that kind of connect. There's nothing too serious to have to sit down through. And that even goes for the strips. This is just kind of like I don't know how to describe it. This is more like of like a B side of a record, right? When you think especially when I think about the Goon, the first four Albatross issues and the Dark Horse stuff is what I think about. I don't think about the stuff from Avatar or anything, but it's like a really cool B side to get more Goon content in there. Um, Especially as a longtime fan, I wouldn't say it's not worth reading. Some people would probably steer you the other way, but I think it's necessary reading for the character. The artwork's incredible. Um, the humor's really funny. There's laugh out loud moments in here. Like my favorite moment of this entire issue, or this entire volume, I should say, is the ridiculous chainsaw moment in issue 2, where the talking chainsaw comes out to hack up Fishy Pete and the two-headed monster, or maybe the moment where they say to the vampire, fuck you, dude, I'm gonna strap you to the car and light you on fire. Like, what kind of shit? Like, who thinks of that as a joke? But it's funny. It's so like in your face and shocking that it kind of forces you to laugh at it. I mean, even in issue 1, where the goon, he's like, man, I just need to go get a drink, and he's like, oh man, I accidentally punched the chimp in the guts. I mean, that's funny. I mean, it's good stuff, man. It makes me smile ear to ear as I'm talking about it with y'all. I'm grinning. I just think this stuff is incredible. Even like the this little cold open stuff with Goon and Frankie. Like, this is like modern Goon up here with like the forward, um, talking about rough stuff and where they came before. I mean, look, they're deprecating about like their former appearance, and you have your Goon and Frankieisms, especially Frankie as he's dealing with the butler. I mean, that's just so good. I mean, and I have to tip my hat to Eric Powell. He's kept these characters incredibly consistent throughout the years, and this was a real big treat, y'all. I've been rambling on for a while, but going back to what I said earlier, rough stuff. To get the full experience, you can go pick up. Um, you can go pick up the first incarnation and the third incarnation, and go ahead, if you really want to get the whole scope, pick up bestsellers number 1. These 3 are going to get you your full experience for the volume. If you're going to collect individual issues, of course, bestsellers number 1 is the way to go. Dreamwalker Zero, Dreamwalker Carousel, and then Avatar Press's Goon number 1 through 3. Now, if you want the bonus material that I also touched on, you're going to want to get the third incarnation of the Goon. If you want the black and white only stuff, all collected in one, you can pick up the first incarnation. It also has the stuff about Monster Boy in it as well. But yeah, what would I rate Goon in the rough stuff here? Out of a 5-star basis, it was really short. And what's frustrating is there's some things like bestsellers that's not included. I feel like if it had that, and it maybe this third incarnation, because the third incarnation is actually the one that I own currently. If it had that and it had the stuff that the previous 2 incarnations had with the Monster Boy, and maybe it was better edited in the bonus features with the new stuff they added, I probably would give this a 4.5. But since it's missing that stuff, I'd probably give this a solid 4 out of 5 stars. It's not going to be the greatest Goon volume, but I definitely think it's overlooked. This is a great foundation for a character. Trust me, if y'all pick this up and you don't like Volume 0, pick up Volumes 0 through 2 if you can, and try to read 0 first with the bonus stuff, and then read 1 and 2. As we'll get into that shortly, I'm sure. I think you'll be hooked if you just give it some more time. But since I've already read this stuff before, it just makes me appreciate this a whole lot more. Maybe I'm looking at it a different way than most people would, but yeah, I really enjoyed myself with this volume. Can't recommend it enough, and I cannot wait to talk about Volume 1 in our next installment, Nothing But Misery. Until next time, let me know down in the comment section if you're able to check out the Goon Volume 0, Rough Stuff, and all the other stuff I mentioned in this. What did you think about it? What was your favorite moments of the comic? What do you think about Eric Powell's writing, his art style? And what's your thoughts on the character? And do you have any fond memories with this series? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.